Hi, it's Ryan, and it's time for an edited battle report. It's from the IGL Highlander event, which is a beginners focused event at 200 points and a very unique rule. There can only be one, or well, each unit has availability one, which poses some unique list building challenges. So immediately, how do I play Caledonia? And Military Orders is out. Tunguska I didn't really want to try here, and Assassin's Baram wasn't really grasping me at time. So that left me with one sectorial I play. Kosmoflot. Okay, so let's be clear. It's a beginner's league, and I'm not an all-star player. Like, I'm a solid 4 out of 10 player. I know the rules, but I make mistakes, and it costs me games, like this one. So who or what was I playing? As mentioned before, I was playing Kosmoflot, and my opponent was playing Tunguska. And the mission was the ITS Direct Action Mission Superiority, which is a simplified supremacy, I believe. It's overall a very nice, easy mission. So how did I do? Well, I lost. A number of factors played into it, largely my choices, and then both lists played. Then the dice, because wow, I got with those dice. So here's the lists. There's some really wild lists here. Here's mine. Being a beginner's league, I didn't want to just take 2 bears, balls, and some unknown ranger nonsense, so I held back, and even then I think it's more or less fine list. Just small issues. Fire teams were allowed, so I decided to take advantage of it with a Scots Guard, AP Spitfire, an AP Sniper from Tovlik, and a Stranic Doctor. That was to be my power team. That didn't happen for good reasons I'll talk about in a minute. The goal was to use the Discount Unknown Ranger and Scots Guard to punch through anything armoured I'd come up against with the Burst and AP. And it's not a bad trooper at 30 points, I think. Arm 3, min-3 in stealth means moving through repeaters and bursting down anything Tunguska presents. Or well, that was the plan that never materialised. The Frontovlik Sniper was here to deal with the inevitable mimetism I would come against from any faction, which, unless you're meleeing, Ariadna struggles with it. Oh boy, did I struggle with it. He didn't do much here before getting Guided Missile Strike, but overall I think it has legs and lower points. He took out a Transductor, and if necessary I reckon he could scare the crap out of the Vostok or very well delayed him. The Stranic is a wildcard doctor and a specialist, which is what I wanted, so he was in. A fantastic addition to Kosmoflot, and I can't wait for the model. The Rockhalt Lieutenant for cheapness, and a Zenit 7 for chain of command, specialisms, and threatening with the decoys. In hindsight, COC may not have been needed, and the AP Sniper Rifle may have been better here. Next up is a duo of a Varangian and a Patcher. The Patcher was my key op, so really that didn't help much. The Varangian was fine here, he's great. He's a regular Galwegian. The Patcher didn't do much, except boop a button and get flattened by, I think, a breaker rifle. The Vulcan shotgun was threatening, but I think the heavy flamethrower might have been a better choice here, for the grenades to threaten and dug in pieces. It was nice to use, it's just a shame he's really slow. The Raven Eye Officer is a cheap order and specialist, so he was pretty much a must-have. The SAS is pretty similar and was pretty nice to have. Unfortunately, Dice got her dead, and maybe I should have been a bit more aggressive with her placement to really put the screws to my opponent. The Armandino was a cheap warband kill and push buttons. He did something, so I can't complain, but I could have been far more aggressive and had a much better placement of him. And finally, the Warcore. You know why there's a Warcore in the list. Here is my opponent's list recreated from memory, and when I saw it on the table, I chuckled, because honestly, it's a hilarious list for 200 points. We had a good discussion about why we love Tunguska, and yeah, this shows why we're both drawn to the Crime Lords in space. So his big fire team was the Vostok, Fiddler, and Stempler, and God was a big old chunk of wounds in Mid-6 I couldn't deal with. But again, I'll talk about that in a bit. So he had his key ops in here, and attaching also, which means he had 5 orders per turn that I had to deal with, which was a lot, and he out-ordered me. Fantastic choice at 200 points. The Inventor, Meteor, Vertigo, and Heckler were a pain in my backside, as they spotlit, guided missile strike, isolated, immobilized, and just zoned out so much of the board, and I think will just be difficult. Again, solid choices at 200 points, not impossible to deal with, especially with the above, but I would have had to be very smart to deal with it. Transductor Zond, which provided a minor speed bump and more damned repeater coverage, and the Salute, who only existed to make sure the Meteor came on the board and the Vostok got marksmanship. It made a nice Harris, just top tier. The Sec Det was a mission thing, we both had one, it was nice for extra order. Round 1. I won the lieutenant role with a 3 or something, and he rolled a 17, so I chose to go first, and deployed and so on. I reserved my Armandino to take the less guarded side, in this case, the left. I maybe should have gone right to deal with these Harris, but then I would also have to have dealt with these Camel Worker, who I was certain was a Heckler, so I deployed him to the left, which I think was a bit of a mistake. So turn 1 I spent like 6 orders on him moving up the board, pushing a button which guaranteed me a point, but then I made a conscious decision to push up and be a pickle for my opponent, which was a sound plan and maybe cost my opponent 2 or 3 orders to deal with him, but it would ultimately cost my Armandino. Not a massive loss, but if I had, say, kept him in my lower quadrant, I would have probably secured 2 to his 1 quadrants in the first round and gone 2 points. So he pushed up, threw some smoke, and was a nuisance. Not bad, but he could have taken points with him. The right hand side, I started with my Frontovlik popping out and blasting the Transductor in a perfect counter, and advancing up the board until the objective marker. The Stranic either failed his 2 attempts for the console and got it the first time on his second attempt, or got it on turn 2 on his first attempt. Knowing I couldn't tussle with the Vostok in reactive, I decided to prone the Frontovlik and the Stranic and leave the Scots card out. I had gotten spoiled that the Meteoric Zond existed, but I did not have the orders left to counter him. So I was a little up the creek without a paddle. If I had remembered that it was there a little sooner, I would have moved the Scots guard further out, watching the building and the table edge. In doing so, I might have prevented a lot of incoming damage. My duo didn't do much. I forgot to use the tack aware on my patcher, and I should have just pushed up to grab a zone. Another silly mistake. Now, my opponent's turn. First order, he put marksmanship on the Vostok, and it was then I knew I was in for a hard time, and my SAS would be my only hope. Next up, he whipped round the Vostok to come into line of fire on my Armandino, and loosed 4 shots at him. Fortunately, I rolled at 15 or something, smoke dodging my way out of an early, ignoble death. Next up, his Meteor Zone walked in unopposed, and using the repeater with his inventor, my Frontovlik got spotlit. From there, I knew my time was up. My backup Vostok killer was going to be dead. So next up came the only guided missile strike of the match, despite the dozens of lights on my troopers. The Frontovlik failed his dodge, and amazingly only 1 armor save, going unconscious. The Stranic was also tagged in the template, and I either think dodged the save, or amazingly managed to make all 3 saves. I think this is the last time any of my troopers would make an armor save. Afterwards, me and my opponents discussed if the guided missile launcher was a bit much in a 200-point beginner's league. I think it might be, but it's also a thing I don't know if I could have dealt with outside of military orders or Tunguska anti-hacker lists. I think this is why it was the only guided missile strike of the game, which is fair, it's just a little bit of a pain. I mean, if he didn't want to run it, my suggestion to keep the theme of the list would be to swap the Vertical Zone out for a Salute with total reaction, or keep the missile launcher bot and instead use it as an ARO piece. Not content with one of my fire team dead, the Harris and the Meteor Zone advanced to try and take out the Scots Guard. One I failed, I believe it was the Vostok thanks to the mimetism and high armor on the Scots Guard. Then the Meteor Zone rounded the corner and blasted him with the template mode, while I hoped pistol would unconscious the repeater at least. In this time he had pressed the button and turned the top right corner to him, which meant we had 1 button each. He managed to move round the sec deck with the last couple of orders and put his breaker combi rifle to the test. It hit instantly my Armandino and clearing the zone. With the Harris in the top quadrant, my SAS and the Stranic in the bottom quadrant, and none in the left, the scores and the doors were 0-0 going into round 2, but it was going to be a tricky one for me. Round 2, and I'm already on the back foot, so I think methodically about dealing with the pieces in my road. The Meteor Zond, the Stempler Zond, and the Vostok. First thing, I need points, so the duo moves up and takes cover near the button, and I move the Varangian onto the high ground. It's not the best idea, but it's better than nothing, and it gives me options. Next up, I activate the Stanik to push buttons. I think he got spotlit here, but that's fine, I didn't mind. I was a dead man walking with that Vostok nearby. Once that popped at the second go, 1 too many in my opinion, I discussed line of fire with my opponent, then moved out and shoot the Stempler safely from the gaze of the Vostok. 3 shots loosed and enough slammed through to unconscious the Stempler. Another thing that would hit me, and I had not realised, was the ubiquity of remote presence made it very difficult, if not impossible, to firmly put down a bot. Fiddler would also ensure that any unconscious bot would get back up, and she definitely had the orders to do so. Next in my grand scheme to do damage to his list, I used the Zenit to pop out of camo and blast the Meteor Zond into dead state. AP damage 4 on burst 3 is not much, but here it done honest work. With my last order, I stupidly wasted on resetting the Stanik rather than hiding the Zenit, costing me both rather than just the Stranic. Finally, the Heckler moved, and it threw a fast panda into range of my fireteam duo, terrifying me. Fortunately, I guess it was a deterrent rather than an active attempt to spotlight and murder me. This is when I sussed out he might not guided missile strike me again, but he still has more tools in our workshop to take me out. Moving Fiddler out of safety, he touches the base of the Stemplar on the way and brings him back up. He reforms the Harris, and after that the Vostok is back at full strength. Now supercharged, the Vostok swung round and lined up the Stanek. I think I dodged, but it didn't matter. The Vostok tore through him, and he was ended rightly. Next, they advanced to take cover against the objective, and the Vostok lined up a shot on my Zenit. While both were in our bad ranges, he had burst inside, and I knew I'd be on like 3s at the very most, so I elected to dodge. He got me and put my Zenit down. My efforts to pick apart his team were not only foiled, but I had been picked apart instead. He also censors my SAS, but that doesn't really matter. He dominates 2 zones to my 0, so he gains 2 points, putting it as 2-0 to him. Round 3. Between the rounds I disconnected, and I think that threw me a little, but it gave me time to at least draw up a plan and figure out what I need to do to win, or at least draw. To equalise or win, I need to dominate more zones and kill his Master Breacher, and ideally Fiddler so he can't just push any buttons. Right now, I sussed out I have 5 orders and attack awareness, so it's really tight. Immediately, I think the best chance is for us to use the Varangian to blast Fiddler or smoke so my SAS can walk up and decharge his Vostok to death. 4 saves on 11 might be enough to unconscious him if I crit. I then immediately misplay, quite possibly costing me the match, forgetting how apparently hacking works. I did not break the fire team duo, activated both in the fire team and got my Patcher immobilized B in the middle of nowhere rather than keeping him safe, and got my Varangian isolated with the Heckler's Jammer. Immediately I noticed the cock up and damn near wanted to concede there and then, but no, I'm a big boy and I can fix my mistakes. The correct play here would have been to break the fire team, activate the Varangian, and then move and template the Fast Panda, removing the repeater coverage from the table. This would have allowed me to either push the Patcher up and kill the Heckler and the Sectet, or more intelligently keep him still and leverage that his 2 wounds and his dodge 16 to avoid dying, and getting a point from him. So, plan A was dead in arrival. How about plan B? So no smoke, so I wasted a precious order, camoing up my SAS. Then I coordinate the SAS, the Raven Eye, and the Sectet. Only now I realise the Sectet was not allowed in that order, but we both missed that. I move the SAS up into the open and just outside of the Vostok to CC him next turn. I move the Raven Eye up to dominate at least 1 zone, and the Sectet into the open to force him to make a dilemma. He can discover my SAS, then I've just had 8 inches of free movement from her and the Sectet. He can delay in case I try something with the SAS, but then he could have a Sectet getting a free shot and also lose the ARO. Or he can shoot the Sectet and the SAS got that 8 inches of free movement. Either way, the next order, my SAS is probably going to splat the Vostok, cost him his dominant key ops. He delays, and honestly that's the best outcome for me, since the Sectet isn't that vital. Next order, I break camo, walk in and smash the Vostok. He's on a -9 thanks to shooting me on min -3, range -3, and surprise attack -3 from the SAS. He needs 3 or less and I need a 15+ to crit. I roll a 10. That's respectable. That's a hit. I'm a shoo-in. He rolls 2 dice, a 15 and a 3. He crits and forces 2 damage 15 saves on the SAS. She dies, and that's basically him winning the game. On his turn, he pushes the button, kills my Patcher, kills the Sectet for good measure. I dominate 1 quadrant to his 3, so that's 2 more points. He has the key ops left, that's another point, and he has 3 buttons to my 1, so that's 3 points to him. So the final score is 8-1. I think we recorded 6-1, so I'll message him to fix that. It was a stunning win for him, with a solid list I just didn't have enough answers to. So what did I learn? What did I do next? Well, the Vostok and the guided missile strikes are strong. I had the tool in my armies to deal with them. I just failed to utilise them by either misplaying them or not bringing them. If I had grenades, I would have bum rushed his Verticozond and his Inventor and forced loss of Lieutenant, but I didn't. I learned that Infinity is a dice game, and the dice decide at times that I just wasn't going to win. Don't leave orders on the tables. I didn't use my tack aware once, and it cost me an order the next round. I also didn't use my Lieutenant orders, which meant I gave up 4 orders out of a potential 39. 3 rounds with 11 models, 1 Lieutenant, and 1 tack aware. It doesn't seem like much, but a lot of the time I just felt like I was running out of steam, and in Infinity, every little helps. My opponent put very little at risk and just had a lot of orders each turn to funnel into his fire team to use it to bludgeon me down. Before I activate and make plans, I need to slowly and carefully consider everything I'm about to do before that order begins. For example, I need to double check line of fire, I need to break any appropriate fire teams, and just take a little more thought. Not necessarily time, just forethought. This is ultimately a beginner/learning lead. Losing is fine, but I gotta learn something from it, and I think I have. And finally, Infinity might be a dice game, but that SAS should have murdered the Vostok dead. Anyway, next game I have Capture and Protect. That gets drawn on the 22nd or 23rd of November, so I'll prep a list once I know my opponent. I think I'm likely to bring a faster unit like Bears, Wallace, or a 1-1-2. The final mission also looks neat. I think that will be a great next 2 games. So, that was my video on the first round of the IGL Highlander. Let me know if you liked the video, if I missed anything, or if you like these battle reports and think I should do more. Thanks for watching.